Again, welcome from this side, from the NPNs too, whoever's here and
Yeah,
whoever's gonna listen to it in the future. I hope you have a nice cozy setting to take this all in and to engage. I have some tea prepared for myself. And yeah, jumping straight to the topic. So education itself, it's been on our hearts and minds for a long time. We have discussed, from our own experience, different problems we have had and lacks we have noticed, and maybe even some potential solutions or where we would like to contribute. Um, I did get the chance to go through about half of your paper, Filippo.
Mhm.
So I have some introduction to your ideas which I resonate with, and but I'm not sure others did. So I would really like a little introduction from you, and maybe you can give a little summary of the paper
Yeah,
or of your background overall.
sure, sure. So I'm a social scientist. I went through a multidisciplinary research path. I currently work both within academia and outside academia. I started out from the communication sciences quite a long time ago here at the University of Padua. So I graduated in communication sciences following my interest into human communication and into relationships and into broader dynamics of human communication. Then I realized that I wanted to look at the other side of the social sciences, exploring more the quantitative and statistical, let's say, methods that economics could offer. So I embarked in a PhD in economics, which I eventually finished at the Free University of Amsterdam in partnership with the MIT in Boston, where I spent a few years. During my PhD time, I embarked in a couple of startup adventures. I was working with engineers at the time, working on developing new technologies, and we try to bring them to market. And I've been always very curious, and I wanted to know more about the real society outside of academia. So it was not just that I was attracted by entrepreneurship, but I was attracted as a social scientist to the real world, if you want. And I was also um, uh, pursuing a PhD in economics, even if in behavioral economics, not in a strictly economic field, if you want, looking at human behavior from a quantitative perspective. And then after that period, PhD time and startup adventures, I decided to move back to Italy, to my own country, and I entered a different phase of my life. I'm talking about 15 years ago at this point. When my first child was born, I decided I would settle back here in Italy for a variety of reasons, and I also decided I would reorient my journey towards different topics, namely ethics within economic context and mindful leadership, and eventually science and spirituality. And I emphasize eventually science and spirituality because that shift was also due by a very personal experience I had, an epiphany. I would even call it a mystical experience I had, whereby I really understood what I was called to do in life. So from that moment on a private level, on an independent level, I started exploring, let's say, beyond day job, the frontiers of spirituality and science. And I recently joined the Scientific and Medical Network, and I'm currently gracefully experiencing, let's say, the joy and the work of a truly spiritual path. So a journey which is not just a scientific journey, a research journey, but also, and more than anything else, a personal development journey. And I currently teach at the University of Bologna, sustainable business. So the company side, if you want, the enterprise side of economics. And I also work in the real world, so-called, through the Great Place to Work Institute that you might have heard of. It's a research and consulting institute which deals with employees' well-being within companies. So since a few years, I'm collaborating with them, and that is giving me the extraordinary opportunity of bringing into academia the real situation, not necessarily what you read in the books, but what really drives human behaviors within economic context. So it has been quite an opportunity for me to broaden even more my background as a social scientist, because that remains my angle. I'm eventually an observer, a detached observer of the social world. So over time, it dawned on me the idea that something had to be done for academia. That idea was also born out of my personal suffering within academia, because I ended up being, to some extent, rejected or ignored on several occasions. I've been collaborating within different universities in the US, in the Netherlands, in Austria, at the Austrian Academy of Science here in Italy. But I never found my place. I was too multidisciplinary in a way, meaning that I never managed to feel fully identified within a discipline. And then later on, I never found the kind of more in-depth and spiritual approach I was interested about within those disciplines. So at a certain point, it dawned on me that my experience, my difficult experience, could not necessarily be only mine, that many other people around the world could actually go through similar experiences and couldn't fit in a system that looked to me quite rigid. And so at a certain point, I said, who, if not me, I mean, in a way, could do something about that? I mean, in all humility, I started thinking about, entertaining the idea of creating something new, something of an alternative to what is offered nowadays. And this idea, let's say, that grew also with my experience in teaching. I ended up falling in love with teaching in a quite unexpected way. I wasn't necessarily prone to think that I would have liked teaching. When I was still pursuing a traditional career, I was aiming at the tenure track. All the messages I got were that I had to do research, I had to publish as much as possible, and that teaching would be not necessarily, something to be too much focused on. But then went back to Italy when all my, ambitions crashed in a way. It was even a tough period. Then, yeah, there was teaching that, taught me to refocus even my self-perception towards service, while doing research, at least in the past, I was very much self-centered and, thinking that my role was to, be intelligent and to shine as an intellectual, to come up with bright ideas. There was quite a lot of ego into that, and teaching was an opportunity for me to grounding myself, to be of service to others. And I have to admit that also my experience as an advisor and consultant through the Great Place to Work Institute played a very important role on that respect. Quite unexpectedly and surprising, I thought that it wasn't so important to be the most intelligent guy in the room, kind of hidden message within academia. But there was something else even more important, to be there, to be there within a company, without thinking that you know more. Just be there and do the things you have to do, even if they might not even require a PhD. And that was a very humbling experience that grew me as a human being, and let's say allows me nowadays to feel much more liberated than in the past. Even the expectations I had on myself, and the kind of contributions I look forward to, not necessarily individual contributions, but collective contributions I want to be part of. But of course, I also want to use the expertise as a scientist, the expertise as someone who had been knowing the academia from the inside and had been knowing the real world from the inside, to come up with something new and something needed. So I totally see my future in the paper that I share with you. So that is my life work. That work will never end. That's absolutely clear to me at this point. And it's very reassuring to look at that way, because in the past I would have been tempted to, set, milestones and objectives, concrete objectives to be reached by, a certain deadline. I had that kind of attitude that was very different actually than today. Nowadays, it's just a beautiful opportunity that life offers to me to get to know other people that share the same vision, and to do things with them, to even get out from the isolation that I've been feeling for quite some time as a researcher. As you can imagine, not feeling fully part of any discipline or department. So this is an opportunity for me and for us, for whoever we will want to join the project, to reconnect and let things emerge. I see that a new complementary system eventually will be there, is inevitable. There's no doubt whatsoever within me that is going to happen, and is already happening the moment we speak about it. But life has taught me to be open, not to push necessarily what you think is appropriate, but to be open and to listen, and to act when you feel like it's joyful and it takes not too much effort to act. not to overdo things, not to do things on your own necessarily. Not to think that you know how to get there. Even looking back to the last couple of years, I changed my mind several times, and it's inevitable because things grow with your consciousness. So your consciousness grows and your ideas grow accordingly to your consciousness. And it's inevitable that a draft like the one you saw is destined to change even more in the future, to evolve in a variety of ways that cannot be predicted. And that's a little bit of the new paradigm, I will dare to say. So letting things emerge, tuning into the field, and let the field, the sacred field, we all belong to, lead the way in a way, to become an instrument. And but that, takes quite an effort. And it's easy for me to speak this way, but you can't imagine how much work has been done, in trying to, to grow out of the ego, basically, to say it in a very, brutal way. It's and of course it's a work that never ends, but and it's not that I'm not saying that the ego is also there to support us, but some sides of it at a certain point have to be surrendered in a way. And the moment you do that, you realize that the vision is even much bigger than you expected. Is quite amazing. Actually, up to 3 or 4 years ago, I wasn't even thinking in terms of a new academic system. I was thinking in terms of a new leadership school, something along those lines. And then actually, life was there to tell me that I should aim for more in the form of people providing not so positive feedback to these ideas in sometimes quite unbelievable ways. But of course, it's all a dialogue between our soul and the world out there, with our soul already knowing what we are here to do. So whatever feedback is coming, is just a new signpost. It's a new form of support for us to understand which way to go. So that is possibly useful to be mentioned, because when I say I truly want to engage in a dialogue and hear from you, I really mean it, meaning that I more and more realize that it's always a co-creation. So you guys are allowing me now to think about things, or to say things in certain ways that are totally new, by asking certain questions, by creating an energy field that has some specific features. So after this draft is there and is ready, then another phase opens. My goal now is to have this draft be circulated as much as possible, and then just pay as much attention as possible to the feedback, and to even the kind of people that will approach me with the kind of questions and the kind of considerations, because there is the next step. So, this, yeah, possibly gives you a better idea of where I am and how I came to be at this place.
If you don't mind, like you
Yeah.
don't have to, but would you mind sharing this you called it mystical experience of how you came to your calling?
Yeah.
Just in any detail. You don't have to go too much into it if you don't want to.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was an extraordinary experience that it wasn't the first one. It was the second one. So I'll have to start with the first one at this point. So we go to the personal, but I'm happy and ready to share. I've already done it on other occasions. So the first experience happened possibly at this point some 20 years ago, a little bit less than that. I was living in Boston at the time, and one evening, as any other, I was reading one of Mother Teresa's book, and well, at a certain point, to say all of a sudden is saying, is saying the list. You just count 1, 2, 3, and my perception totally changes, and I find myself immersed in love. That's the best way I have to describe it. Everything was gleaming, and it was as if everything was there for me. So the chairs, there was this generosity of everything surrounding me, being there for me. And the only thing I could do was just crying and just yeah, just be there. I'm not sure how much it lasted, but eventually it faded away. But I remember in the following days, I was looking at the world in a different way. I was constantly thinking about being a community, being with others, like in a bus station, in a bus, within a bus, or in a room with other people. There was this joy there, and this wanting to tell others, hey, don't you see? Can't you realize we are together? We are a community. That was it. That was kind of the ultimate, joy I could have, and of course um, that changed many things. That was something totally unexpected and totally new that all of a sudden came into my life. And then after a couple of years, I was living in Austria at the time. I was living alone, and I had this second extraordinary experience whereby well, it was a evening as again any other. I decided I would go out for a run before dinner, and I was living in the outskirts of town in Salzburg, in a beautiful city surrounded by the Alps. So I remember that evening I was really tuned in the beauty. I was running and just feeling the beauty of the landscape, tuning in with, these trees and mountains. And then, I come back home. I just open the door, and all of a sudden I find myself crashed to the floor, literally overwhelmed by, let's say, an energy, immense energy, and then just one sentence, which is not something you hear. It is something that you are at that point. It's the only way to describe it. And this sentence is that you will work to reconcile science and God. That's it. Full stop. And I was like, whoa. I was again, I was moved, and I couldn't even, almost breathe for a few minutes on the floor, because it was truth. It was me, but it was more than me. It was what I intimately wanted to do all that time, and was even the kind of what I needed to hear after years of struggle within the scientific world. And that became, my mission in a way. That became my mission. And to some extent, no, let's say I never went off track, because even when doing things that are in theory not in line with that mission, with that calling, then I'm always granted the capability to tie them back to the calling, to start seeing things even in an even broader way. So these two polarities, or these two, entities, science and God, became, much broader than I possibly imagined at the time. And I started, getting in touch with authors and researchers that I couldn't even dream of. I had no clue that certain things had been written already. I was very, very far from where I am today. It's unbelievable how much it had, how much I was given by life the opportunity to get in touch with certain messages and to receive certain teachings, mostly from books and from the internet, not necessarily from people who are alive, or at least reachable in the physical way by me. And I never much publicized that. To some extent, it remained up to, let's say, a couple of years ago, some sort of intimate enterprise. So I was feeling that society would not be ready to fully understand what my calling was. But now things are changing, and here I am talking about that with you. It's there's a lot of grace behind that, I must say. And things are accelerating in a way, very rapidly. It's the time for us. It's about time to change the narrative and to talk more explicitly about certain things, even using certain terms. But still, I'm very respectful of where each community is. I sometimes even shy, but in a good way. So this is how things are at this point for me.
Thank you, Filippo, for sharing, and even more so the intimate parts, and I think many of us have been on a very similar journey, and it does humble you or make you shy, to use your words. I would open it up if anyone wants to discuss or ask any questions.
Absolutely. Filippo, thank you for sharing. Thank you for listening to that voice, to that calling, and having the courage to follow through with that, especially given the nature of it, given the nature of becoming inspired to change anything, when often those who are benefiting very much from the rotten systems, the often rotten systems that they may be benefiting from. It takes tremendous courage, but I believe, um, given my experiences and what I've heard a lot about tales of success in history, is that persistence with following your heart, and being persistent about it, being convicted and devoted to this, the world can be better, and wow, there's a lot to change. But, and also, and like you just said at the end, confirming not to come about it as, hey, I have an idea of what's better than what y'all are doing, let's just change it. You mentioned, especially written in your paper, that the new system here is meant to complement the
Yeah.
current one. You're here to understand, well, how are things currently right now, and what do the people need? What are the needs, and how can we adjust and help unfold? Because it's going to take time. Things
Yeah.
take time. And it's beautiful, your courage and commitment. So thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. That's
And
wonderful to hear.
and to go about it as a sort of infinite game, like you said, it may not be completed in your lifetime at least, but it doesn't matter. In fact, it almost makes it more fun and makes it easier to do. I know I've had a great wait when I thought I need to do this big thing, especially in a certain amount of time, or else. Where does that or else comes from? How about instead, I have this opportunity to work on this thing, and I know the universe will bring into my life the right people, the right books, the right information that I need. And wow, so much has already been written, and so much has already been done. And there are people actually out in the world doing these things.
Yeah.
We often work with a limited perspective, and we make a commitment. I want to do this thing, and then you join like this whole party around the world that's
Exactly.
already working on it. And
Thank you,
so,
Bruce.
yeah, thank you.
Would you mind excuse me just a second? I have my son here who needs something from this room.
Sure,
Sorry.
no problem. We can always pause that. Yeah, his I have some notes here in the I've highlighted in his draft I want to bring up, and some questions.
Yeah, I did I did many highlights too. There's so much resonating and many topics we have kind of touched upon as well. You know, bringing it together into real world and
Here I am.
welcome back. One of my favorite, I guess, points was on a more personal level as well, was that, you know, to bring fun into it. You know, it doesn't have to be for many years. So my background is more in psychology. For many years I was really interested and into motivation, you know, like you said, what drives human behavior, but more on a individual and even self-reflective level. And I think now I've come to the point of 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 realizing that motivation is almost irrelevant to me. I think when you like in the sense that when you have to use motivation, it means that something is wrong, or at least that something could be better or more optimal. In the sense that when I have to use my willpower to do anything, it doesn't mean that there aren't hard times or I won't, you know, put effort or use effort. But whenever I would need to use motivation, means that there probably is a better way to do this. And I think this is where joy and these flow states and creativity come into play, because, you know, when you're really tapped into what you should be doing and what you know, but also on the edge of what you don't know, then, like, you know, you lose track of time. You might even forget to eat or sleep for days. Again, of course, that's maybe not optimal either. Like, but when you can cultivate that into a long-term action or behavior, that's I think what will bring the necessary change and the breakthroughs in any discipline, in any field, in terms of, let's say, the individual at least.
Yes.
And so
Yeah. Sorry.
Please go ahead, Bruce.
Tobias.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. No, I just wanted to say thank you, Filippo, also for what you shared. And I recognize myself so much in what you told us. So I've been in academia for close to 10 years before leaving, and I also suffered a lot being in that system. And yeah, also I had this feeling of being called to more multidisciplinary research, but it's been very much rejected and ignored by most professors I've spoken to, and also can relate to these inner transformations, and that has resulted from mystical experiences. So it was just amazing to hear you say all this, because it's to me it's crazy how these structures can be maintained because of the fragmentation between disciplines, for example, and just the competitiveness. Because I was explicitly told that it's unlikely that anyone will ever read my publications, but the important thing is to get the statistics to advance your careers, and most PhD theses are never read by anyone today. And there's so many blank faces among students and PhD students who are really suffering in the system, and yet the structures are still there. And so I feel it's such an important thing to work for. Yeah, I'm very interested to hear about thoughts how we can move on from this. And it's sometimes even strange to me how these structures are able to be maintained, because to me they really hamper scientific progress. And so I'm really curious to hear more about your thoughts about this.
Yeah. Well, what comes to mind is power and ego. As in any other social system, by the way. So, and I was certainly part of it. I was driven by this aspiration for prestige and establishing myself in front of my peers with the title. So yeah, academia is a way to formalize a position in society, a wished position in society, and sometimes disciplines become let's say narrow and rigid because not only we ended up being trapped within a tunnel vision, so to say, but also certain hierarchies are never questioned, certain authorities are never questioned, because they are in a position of power. So yeah, to some extent, yeah, academia is interesting because it certainly reflects the structure of other let's say, societal groups, but it has its own dynamics, and even this full identification of researchers and professors with their intellect, with their field of study, doesn't help, because you get so much invested into the topics you are researching and the perspectives you are exploring and even promoting, then it's very difficult at a certain point to remain open and to accept really accept a critique, and even see competitive perspectives flourish. So it becomes a competitive game to
So you
yeah.
you can't afford to be wrong in a sense.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, in a way. So yeah, but certain things can only be outgrown, in my view, through rising in consciousness. It's not just a matter of creating a new structure, but it's a matter of doing it together with people that have realized certain things, that have grown out of certain attitudes. Otherwise, eventually will inevitably fall back in the older way of thinking and older way of doing, even if within a new structure. So I think a new system can only co-evolve with the human beings that will be part of it. There's no shortcut. There's no imposition of the new system. It has to emerge through people like us that are realizing certain things, that are aspiring to certain things. For example, aspiring to freedom. Because what I ended up realizing is that the moment you focus so much on wanting to, be recognized in certain ways, be, respected for your position, well, you're not really free. It's not a nice position. So nowadays I can definitely say I live better outside academia. I feel much more liberated, and it definitely was not the place for me to be, because life wanted other things from me. But I think it will be to some extent counterproductive to try to convince others of certain propositions. You have to get there by yourself, even by in sometimes tough ways. Being ignored, being rejected, being lonely, feeling lonely. Sometimes it's a necessary passage. But yeah, I think there's so much work now to do for us. It's unbelievable. If I objectively look at it, yeah, wow. I'm just blown away by the kind of work that inevitably expect us if we really mean what we mean, what we say.
And like you said in the paper, that hopefully that the next generation academics can't be afraid to get their hands dirty, but with the proverbial real world. There is work to do. And you had outlined throughout the paper your dream of this new academia, what it might look like and how we might get there. And so, for example, you dream of a system which is fully conscious of the rigidities and the limits of the current one. and tries to prevent or overcome them. That there's a certain culture of separatedness and distinctiveness that universities are thought to occupy this morally superior occupation in society, to the point where, like per your words, condescending or ignoring the kaleidoscope of practical and intellectual operations that are generated into it. You outlined that professors would understand the scope of what they were talking about by having personally experienced it, at least on some level, or part of a new kind of academic training. And so on that, it's like, okay, what would that look like? But you think about, you outlined that there's a rejection or diminishment of the subjective points of view. Universities are always aiming at objective, unemotional, and unspiritual descriptions of reality. It ignores peculiars of experiences that are very valid, they're real, they're experienced by humans, that have been pushed aside by people in different cultures, different parts of the world. And so there is a lot. How do we shift? And it might just be a generational thing, but the work that you are doing to help outline this, to inspire, and for us to participate in sharing this vision too and helping to realize it. So given the challenges of shifting from this theory to practice, what does it actually look like? So what initial steps can be taken to prototype or experiment with your proposed system? Perhaps there are examples already?
Yeah, what comes to mind is that to some extent the new science and the new education is already here. It's just scattered around. It's just embodied in people that still don't know each other. So one way to start would be curating a space where different resources are made available in a centralized way and in a coordinated way, in a way which is not just a collection of resources, but is a new proposition, is a new way to systematize knowledge, because that's the peculiarity of academia that, in my view, still is in great need. We need a place in society, an institution in society, call it an institution or whatever you want. Let's say in the future what other words might be there for us, but you need, a place where knowledge can be trusted for certain purposes. So we need to broaden the purposes, not just the purpose of, for example, economic production, or maximization of utility, the modern age purposes, but new purposes like having more and more human beings flourishing, having more and more human beings discovering their sole purpose. So by having a new space curated with clear purposes and even with clear boundaries, what can enter into the space and what cannot enter, because that is very important in my view, because this is a system which will emerge among many others. So other kinds of knowledge, which might be, still necessary for certain purposes, might not necessarily be, part of the framework of a new academia. And the polarity and the polarities of openness and closeness should be both respected in a way. So, or at least a standard and creativity. So this is what comes to mind. And, you know, several experiments are already on the way. I cite some of them within the paper. And it's a very important opportunity to observe what is already possible and what is already happening, and what else is possible and what is still missing. For example, I observed that the new initiatives which are to some extent aligned with the vision I have tend to be niche initiatives, tend to be, let's say, thought and proposed to just a few people. But what I deeply care about is something that could work at a mass level. I don't like this word, but at a really big level, meaning the millions of students that these days have no alternative, and sooner or later will have to be reached by alternatives that will have to be convincing from different perspectives, even from a practical perspective, finding a job, for example. So yeah, that's what comes to mind.
I want to add that even if you didn't mention it about schools, it's
Yes.
because of my experience with my little children, because I didn't want them to be kind of raised in the system. Well, at least not in Colombia. Here in Spain, I didn't have any chance. But in Colombia, I tried to not use traditional schools. And I saw that there is something coming up from parents themselves. They don't want the traditional schools. It's a minority, but that's happening. And there's new movements like homeschooling. People prefer to teach them at home that taking them to a school. Or there are emerging these non-traditional schools. And for example, the one in Colombia, I was amazed. It was the purpose was to make the kids happy. That was the purpose of the school. And I said, this is it. Yeah, because the other ones, they just were just their promise was the best scores, and this is the best school, and in the ranking of the country and all of that, and academic and whatever. And I said, maybe that's not it. Yeah. And what are we going to do with all those artists and musicians that don't fit there in something so academic and so structured? And what if my son is going to be an artist? So yeah, but unfortunately here in Spain, I couldn't afford a non-traditional school. So well, here I am in the system, but so yeah, I really encourage everything that you're doing, all
Thank you,
your
Natalia.
ideas.
Natalia. I'm conscious that it's 8:30 here in Italy, and Natalie and myself have to move on to another meeting. It's unfortunate. I would have loved to continue, but this is how things are. So thank you so much. It has been, yeah, beautiful. Yeah, that's the only word that comes to mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And
Thank you.
I know we only scratched the surface, so
Yes,
I'm already eager to meeting.
Let's continue the dialogue whenever you want.
Yeah.
Here
All
I
right.
am.
No,
Thank
we
you
would
again.
love.
Stay in touch.
we would love to have you again and to dive even deeper.
Oh,
So-
absolutely. I would love it as well. All the best, guys.
Thank
All the
you.
Likewise.
best.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Let's keep
You well.
doing the
Bye.
good work.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Be well.
Bye.